If you're in your 20s or 30s or know somebody in their 20s or 30s, show them this video. It is amazing. What I've done is taken the data for the S&P 500 for the last 90 some years and ran the numbers of what somebody would have if they invested so much a month. What I've done is given you a whole lot of choices here, and we're just going to go through some of them. What I mean by the S&P 500, if you go to a firm like Vanguard or Fidelity and look up for an S&P 500 index fund and start investing in that, this is the kind of numbers you can look at if the numbers do anything like they've done in the last 93 years. Well, let's go through this spreadsheet. I'll show you how impressive it is. Most people would think investing in the stock market in a downtrend like during the Depression years would be a very bad thing to do. What I've done here is you look over here in column C, right here, I've taken the returns for the stock market or the S&P 500 for these different years. 1929, the return was down 8%, down 24% the next year, and so on. All the ones in red are negative years. So who would want to be in the stock market when these down years? Watch what happens. Let's take somebody that's investing $350 a month. Again, it depends on what part of the month you put it into, how these figures work out, but they're going to be close approximations. Somebody investing $350 a month beginning in 1929 with these kind of returns, what would they have after 30 years? Over here in this column, after 30 years of investing $350 a month, they would have had $1.311 million. After 35 years, they would have had $2.123 million, investing $350 a month. It's just unbelievable. If you can put your money in there and let it go for any 30 or 35-year period, if it's anything like the last 93 years, these are the kind of returns you'd be looking at, 2.13 million. But if you take all this data for all these years, the absolute minimum up here in the red, the absolute minimum, and I believe that was the year 1984, you would have had $1,027,000. The median, meaning half the time you would have had more than that, half the time you would have had less, up here in the yellow, you would have had $1.393 million. This is investing $350 a month. The maximum, $3,285,000. In other words, investing a car payment, the equivalent of a car payment, into one of these S&P 500 index funds, these are the kind of numbers you're looking at after 30 and 35 years. Don't look at 10-year returns. After all, 10-year return in 1929 to 1938, you would have been down quite a bit because the stock market was going down. But if you can stick it out for the 30 and 35 years, again, if you're in your 20s or early 30s, you've got 30 or 35 years. Look at the kind of numbers you can have. Now, what I've done is I want you to look up here in this blue box up here, because this is going to show you the kind of returns you can have using these numbers. And if you look at this, 100% of the time after 35 years, you would have had over $1 million. You would have had at least $1 million 100% of the time. 42% of the time, you would have had $1.5 million after 35 years. Again, you can look at the 30 years also. 44% of the time, you would have had over $1 million. But again, if you've got enough time to do this for 35 years, look at the kind of returns. It's basically a guarantee if the market does anything like it's done in the last 93 years. And unless you have some kind of reason why you think the stock market's going to not keep repeating itself, yes, it's going to have up and down years. Look at this decade right here. Again, we've already saw all the reds in the beginning of 1929. And yet, after 35 years, that individual had the 2.123 million. So unless you think the stock market is going to totally collapse in the next 35 years, put it in there, let it go. Let's just run some other numbers. Some of the reasons people might not do this is because I don't have $350 a month. Let's just see what $200 a month would do. I'm going to update this. It'll take just a second. $200 a month. The minimum would be $587,000 after 35 years. Again, that's $200 a month. The median would be $796,000. And again, the maximum is 1.877. But if you can afford $200 a month, Try to increase that. I'm going to go over here and increase this by 5%. Over in column A, I'm going to increase it by 5% a year. What that means is the first year you put $200 a month in. The next year you'd increase it by 5% to 210. Then it'd be 221 and so on. So in other words, you're going to gradually, as inflation and your wages go up, you're going to increase the amount you're putting in because originally you couldn't afford more than 200. But look what happens if we update this. Again, using $200 starting and increasing that by 5% a year for each month. Let's update this and see where we'd be. After 35 years, we'd be up over here. The minimum you would have at 898,000. The median would be 1.319. That's beginning with $200 a month. Most anybody can afford $200 a month if they really want to be serious about their future retirement. Increasing it by 5%, 310, you'd be putting in $310 after 10 years and so on. Look at the kind of numbers you'd have. I want to do one more variable here, not only increasing it by 5%, but also every fifth year increase that by $50. The reason I'm doing this is most people, their wages are going to go up, and you want to get as much money working for you as you possibly can, but yet not be too painful. Again, in this scenario, increasing every 5 years by $50, the first 5 years you'd be increasing it by the 5%, and then the sixth year you'd be increasing it by the 5% plus $50. So I'd be putting in $305 a month into your investment account, into your S&P 500 index fund. Look what would happen. Let's see what would happen. Let's update this with this scenario. You'd be up the minimum, the absolute minimum you would have if the market does anything like it's done in the last 93 years. The absolute minimum you would have had was $1.11 million. The median, again, up here, 1.696 million. You can have as much as 4 million. Again, this is starting out at a very doable amount, $200 a month, increasing it by 5% each year, and every fifth year, increasing it by $50. This is very doable if your priority is to make sure retirement is a comfortable one. Again, this is the kind of numbers you can look at. We can run all kinds of different numbers. I'm going to go back up here and make this 0. Let's just make it a 3%, increase it by 3% each year. Now let's pick out $300 a month. Again, your goal is really to try to, if you look down here in the income, I put 60,000 there. 10% of 60,000 would be $500 a month. Can't afford $500 a month? Start out with $300 a month. Let's see where that would put you. $300 a month, increasing it by 3% a year. You're up over $1 million for the minimum. Again, I'm just looking at the minimum. This is the worst case scenario. The median would be 1.575. Let's just look at a couple other numbers. Let's say you can actually afford the $500 a month, which is 10% of 60,000. $500 a month, let's see where you would be. Hopefully these kind of numbers will really give you an incentive to do it, to just absolutely do it. Look at this, $500 a month. Let's go back to the 0, excuse me, over here, not increasing at all. $500 a month, 1.467 million would be your absolute minimum. Again, if it does anything like it's done in the last 93 years, the median would be almost $2 million. So if you would prioritize your investments, $500 a month is very doable, making $60,000 a year, knowing that this is going to make your retirement much more comfortable. But again, if you can't afford the 500, let's go back to the 300, and let's go back to the 5%, increasing 5% monthly. Go back and review that. Minimum would be 1.37 million. The median would be, again, almost 2 million. Again, our chart here in the blue, 100% of the time you would have over a million. 86% of the time you'd have 1.5 million, and 51% of the time you'd have 2 million. That's after 35 years investing $300 a month, increasing it by 5% over here. So the first year would be 300, next year 315, and so on. You can see how this works. These are the kind of numbers you can have if the market does anything like it's done in the last 93 years. I just want people to know these numbers because they are incredible. I wish somebody would have told me this 40 years ago when I started investing. Again, even if you just have to start at $100 a month and then increase it by 5%. Let's just see what that would do. $100 a month, that's like That's like a cable bill. The minimum you would have is 449. The median be 659,000. Of course, you'd be increasing it by 5%. Of course, if you start at 100 a month, let's increase it by 10%. See where you'd be. Again, this is if you're starting out. I can't afford much more than that. Start out with 100 and increase it by 10% a year. Updating this, minimum 776, the median 1.3 million. That's starting out at $100 a month, increasing it by 10% each year. These are the kind of numbers you can look at. Again, tell your people about this video. Let them see these numbers. They will be amazed as well as you are, as well as I am. These are just incredible numbers, and this can show you what just a little bit can do over a long period of time. Again, we're talking about 30 or 35 years. If you can do it for that, if you're young enough, get it in there and let it do its work. You will be amazed.